Hi, today we're going to be presenting the grade group presentation on David Walker. I'm Abhishek Sankarnarayanan.
I'm Bernard.
I'm Jonathan Choi.
Now, to give you some background on David Walker, there is a rich influence of multiple different African American people in the history of the United States of America. Many of them rose to prominence in the fight against slavery in the early 19th century. One such abolitionist was David Walker. David Walker was the son of an enslaved father who had died before his birth and also a son of a free mother. American law at the time followed the principle partus sequitur ventrum, which is Latin for delivery follows the stomach. So that law was basically that the social status of the child always mirrored that of the mother, regardless of that of their father. In this case, David Walker's mother was free, and so by this law he was also free, even though his father, who died before his birth, was a slave. He was the famous author of the pamphlet Appeal. He rebelled against slavery in the South and discrimination in the North. He was also a member of the first African American newspaper, and you have to understand that this is quite an amazing feat because at the time it was not normal for African American people to hold such high positions in their careers, and David Walker was one of the first to do so. So what signaled the need for this activism? 6 to 7 million people of African descent were imported to the country by white Europeans, and they were committed, and they were the victim of many different atrocities. For example, they were forced to breed with each other, leading to a significant increase in their population, and the significant increase in the population was used for manpower on the fields and other such activities. They were dehumanized through biological evidence of inferiority during the Enlightenment period, which is the main rationale used to justify slavery. At the time, they thought they had biological evidence that black people were inferior to white people because of their closer relationship to apes, which we now know is totally false and not the right way to think about it. The constitutional amendments were also unjust towards the white people. For example, the 3/5 compromise, whereby each black person counted for only 3/5 of a vote, and so this was mainly a political move used by the southern states to garner more House representatives in the government. And finally, the other revolutions happening around the area at the time, for example, the Haitian Revolution, which was successful, gave black people in the United States the confidence that they could do something similar and gave rise to a lot of abolitionists at the time. David Walker was one of them. And what did Walker advocate for? He advocated for black nationalism. This is basically a union among black people that brings with it a certain political determination to maintain a black national identity for people of black heritage. So it's basically saying that black people are also a citizen of the United States, and it really just encapsulates that entire idea. He also advocated for fighting against the people who oppressed them, and in this case, it should be the white slavers who were really oppressing the black people at the time. And his main goal was to take back the land that the African Americans were putting so much effort into to make it a better place. So it only made sense that they should reap the benefits of what they sow. And most importantly, he questioned God and how he would allow something like slavery to occur, and called white people very hypocritical because they were also devout Christians.
And now I'm going to talk about the thesis and argumentation that we've made. And I'm going to talk about the thesis and argumentation for this assignment. So our research question was, how was David Walker's appeal unique to the sentiments of abolitionism at the time? And to this, we responded by arguing David Walker's appeal called for drastic changes that promoted black nationalism, which differed greatly from strategies of white and black abolitionists that perpetuated the position of black people as subordinate to white Americans. This was not similar to abolitionist sentiments in the 19th century. And this is because the current abolitionists believed that they had to end enslaving African Americans and restore their rights, which is different than what David Walker argued for. A notable abolitionist, Frederick Douglass, fought through multiple ways. He started to teach African American children and adults reading and writing while he was in Baltimore, Maryland. He also connected to the public through his newspaper called the North Star. And through his book, The Narrative of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, he narrated the events of his life. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation also assisted in freeing some of the slaves up north, and the famous Underground Railroad also assisted in transporting enslaved black people from the south to the north.
So Walker's main work was Walker's Appeal in 4 articles, together with a preamble to the colored citizens of the world, but in particular and very expressly to those of the United States. So one of Walker's main tenets in his work was his call for equality. At this point, around 210 years had passed before the introduction of slaves in the British colonies of the New World, before he published his appeal. This systemic subordination of black people in the United States had placed them in a depressed socio-political position by the white population, specifically more in the South of America. The Enlightenment era ideals were used to justify slavery, despite its direct contradiction to its main premises of science and mental prowess and dominance of humans. In The Enlightenment, written by Dorinda Outram, the claim was made that the continuation of slavery throughout the Enlightenment, despite this contradiction, was due to the economic benefits of slavery. According to Outram, the ideals of Enlightenment were argued and fitted to support the institution of slavery. By creating a hierarchy of social statuses that unfairly labeled both women and non-whites as animalistic, the ideals of Enlightenment were preserved through this institution. The slave narrative around this time was an abolitionist strategy utilized to portray an emotional and humanizing side to the slave experience and the people oppressed as support for abolition. The slave narrative created a sympathetic story that was in line with white supremacy by necessitating white authenticators to corroborate the stories of freed slaves. This was a way of supporting black people's fight for freedom while also demonstrating the same principles that had kept them oppressed. The slave narrative does this by portraying slaves as grateful for white abolitionists for their mercy and willingness to help out the poor black population come out of slavery. This was ultimately an attempt to abolish slavery through the preservation of black submission to white superiority, which is inherently flawed and can be seen as conserving the effects of slavery even after the 14th Amendment. Walker argues for the widespread adoption of black nationalism and equality, which differs fundamentally from the strategies of abolitionists described before at the time. In an excerpt from Appeal, Walker's work, Walker demonstrates this notion of equality among all men through argumentation from the Declaration of Independence. In the quote below, down here, Walker argues that American society is hypocritical regarding equality, whereas the Declaration of Independence states that all men are created equal. Southern economy revolves around the subservience of people, thus making the country fundamentally contradictory to one of its founding principles. This argument of hypocrisy in society pervades throughout the civil rights movement and beyond. This unique and drastic divergence from the common ideas of hierarchical society in America demonstrates the revolutionary ideals that made his work so significant to the time period. In Appeal, Walker uses the word citizen in his title to reference the inherent rights that his people of this world should have. This provides a juxtaposition that highlights the differences between these unalienable and natural rights that people should have according to the Declaration of Independence, and the enslavement of a people and the blatant disregard for their rights. This was controversial due to the pervasive idea that black people were incapable of higher thought, which made them unable to be politically active members of society. Melvin L. Rogers argues in David Walker and the Political Power of Appeal that this is one of the reasons Walker's work was so revolutionary and provided the country with new ideas about the identity of the Black American.
Another important part of Walker's appeal was his call for revolt. In this written document called Appeal, Walker recognizes the subservience of African American communities, and he says that that is what is causing their enslavement to white people. He also stated that America was built from the blood and tears of slaves, the foundation for the idea of black nationalism itself. He also wanted to fight for the rights that he believed that all African Americans were entitled to, that the same inalienable rights that white people receive, that black people should receive as well. And this idea sprung from when he watched protests of other communities, when he observed Native Americans, Jamaicans, and Haitians, as we previously mentioned, to show that revolution and fighting back against their oppressors was the only way out for African Americans at the time. One of our primary sources, written by Buckingham, breaks apart Appeal by its sentence structure to analyze how he calls for revolt. And this is done by the rhetorical questions and commands. And it also uses the percentage of statements compared to questions and the commands. And since there's mostly statements, you can understand that Walker is trying to convey and make factual statements about what he believes and what he believes the discourse is needed to achieve their intended goal. And he also, this demonstrates that Walker is appealing not only to other African Americans, but also to Northern abolitionists and other white people to change their ideologies. Thank you.
All right, see you guys later.